In the thunderous world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, there are few stories that roar as loudly as the one of Charles "PeeWee" Goldsmith. From the gritty streets of Milwaukee, all the way to the sun-scorched highways of Las Vegas, Goldsmith's journey through the ranks of the infamous Hells Angels is a story about ambition, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of brotherhood. But PeeWee would learn that sometimes the family you choose can be just as problematic as the one you were born into. Join us as we rev up our engines in this explosive episodes of Apex Crime Lords, where we'll explore the life of a man who spent decades chasing the elusive promise of true brotherhood. Unfortunately, he only discovered that in the world of outlaw bikers, the greatest danger comes from within. The story of Charles "PeeWee" Goldsmith is a tale of power, betrayal, and the harsh realities of life on two wheels. Warning: the following video is meant for educational purposes only and should not be taken otherwise. Apex Crime Lords does not condone, encourage, or glorify the actions of the individuals covered in this program. Viewer discretion is advised. Keep watching until the end to see what's next on Apex Crime Lords. Charles Goldsmith. His story starts in the heart of America's Dairyland in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was born in the early 1950s, and Charles entered a world where the rumble of Harley-Davidson motorcycles was as common as the smell of brewing beer. But for Goldsmith, the iconic motorcycles that put his hometown on the map were still many years away. As Charles was growing up in the 1960s, he was a boy who had an appetite for danger that went way beyond his years. When he was only 8 years old, he was already out causing trouble. He would jump onto moving freight trains just for the sheer fun of it. This daredevil behavior was more than just childhood mischief. It was a glimpse into the adrenaline-fueled life that was waiting for him. Goldsmith's childhood was far from ideal. His biological father was absent from his life and was really just more of a shadow. And Goldsmith describes his stepfather as a piece of crap drunk who offered no positive guidance or direction whatsoever. So young Charles grew up in a house without a strong male role model, and he found himself searching for direction and purpose. Because of this vacuum, Goldsmith turned to sports, where he found mentors in his wrestling and boxing coaches. These tough, no-nonsense men gave Charles the structure and discipline that he was really lacking at home. Under their guidance, Goldsmith began to channel his relentless energy and growing physical prowess into something more constructive. But this rebellious streak that drove him to jump onto moving freight trains wasn't so easily tamed. In the 9th grade, Goldsmith's simmering anger boiled over in a confrontation that would alter the course for the rest of his life. A teacher who attempted to humiliate him in front of class had pushed Goldsmith too far. The physical altercation resulted in him being transferred from a Catholic school to a public school. That was a change that would expose him to a whole new world of influences. Goldsmith's reputation as a fighter grew quickly at his new school. His size alone made him stand out, because by his senior year of high school, he had grown to 6'6" and weighed in at 265 pounds. But now it wasn't just his tremendous size that drew attention. He had a natural talent for wrestling, and he went after it with the dogged determination that would later serve him well as an outlaw biker. As a high school wrestler, Goldsmith got a taste of the sweet nectar of success. He became a statewide champion and would dominate his opponents with a combination of raw power and honed skill. These victories gave him a sense of identity and purpose that he had been missing in his chaotic home life, and it taught him some valuable lessons about discipline, perseverance, and the thrill of victory. These are lessons that would shape his approach to life in the years to come. But even as Goldsmith excelled in the structure of high school athletics, there was always the allure of a less constrained lifestyle that was beginning to take hold. The rumble of the motorcycles and the freedom of the open road, plus the camaraderie of biker culture, were calling to him. As he was entering adulthood, PeeWee Goldsmith was about to start on a journey that would take him away from the wrestling mats of Milwaukee and into the heart of America's most dangerous motorcycle club. Goldsmith's path into the Hells Angels was neither straight nor easy. Like a lot of guys in search of identity and belonging, he first found his way into a smaller local motorcycle club called the Sinners. It was in this club that Goldsmith got his first taste of being a biker. He loved the parties, the brotherhood, and the ever-present undercurrent of danger. Goldsmith had some natural leadership abilities, and his size and imposing presence quickly set him apart. Within a few years, he had taken on the role of president of the Sinners. But even while he was leading his own club, Goldsmith's eyes were drawn to a bigger prize, the Hells Angels. They had a fearsome reputation and an international presence, and they represented the top of the outlaw biker culture. For Goldsmith, that was the ultimate goal. The turning point came in 1991 at a biker event in Humboldt, Iowa. Wading through the sea of leather and chrome, it was here that Goldsmith got his first taste of the real Hells Angels. The sight of their iconic Death's Head patches, plus their well-maintained bikes and their air of invincibility, made a really deep impression on him. It was in that moment that Goldsmith made a decision that would shape the next 2 decades of his life. He was going to become a Hells Angel. But of course, you don't just join the world's most infamous motorcycle club by filling out an application. Goldsmith dedicated himself to the next 3 years to his goal with the same single-minded focus that he had once had for wrestling. He would regularly make the 6-hour trips from Wisconsin to Minneapolis, where the nearest Hells Angels chapter was located. These trips were more than just rides. They were more like pilgrimages. Each trip would bring him closer to the brotherhood he was looking for. And during this time, Goldsmith did whatever they asked of him. He went to parties, he helped out with bike maintenance, and he stood ready to prove his loyalty in any way that was required. His size and fighting skills made him a really good prospect for the club. But the Hells Angels wanted more than just muscle. They wanted dedication. They were asking for reliability and a willingness to put the club above everything else. After months of hanging around the club, Goldsmith was finally given the coveted bottom rocker, which marked him as a prospect for the Minneapolis chapter of the Hells Angels. This was a big step, but it wasn't the end of his journey. As a prospect, Goldsmith was subjected to a grueling probationary period. He was expected to be at the beck and call of full patch members and to prove his worth in fights with rival clubs, because he had to show his unwavering loyalty to the Hells Angels. But just as it seemed Goldsmith was on the verge of getting his dream, life threw him a curveball. After a year of being a prospect, he was unexpectedly dismissed from the club, and they never really gave him a good reason as to why. This, of course, left Goldsmith devastated and confused. It was like all the hard work and effort he had been put in had been for nothing. Now, a lesser man might have given up at this point, but Goldsmith's determination was made of stronger stuff. He did not let this setback derail his goal. Instead, he set his sights on an even bigger target, which was the San Francisco chapter, which was the very birthplace of the Hells Angels. His move to San Francisco was a gamble that paid off. The West Coast Angels were impressed by Goldsmith's persistence and reputation and gave him another chance. He had to go all through the prospect period again, but this time he had the added pressure of knowing it might be his last shot at wearing the so-coveted patch. Finally, in 2001, after years of dedication and sacrifice, Charles PeeWee Goldsmith finally achieved his goal. He was patched in as a full member of the founding chapter of the Hells Angels. As he wore the leather vest with its iconic Death's Head patch, Goldsmith felt a sense of accomplishment and belonging that he had been chasing for most of his life. Little did he know that his greatest challenges and his greatest disappointments were still lying ahead. Now that he was a full-patch member of the Hells Angels, Goldsmith threw himself into the biker lifestyle with the same ambition and intensity that he had once applied to wrestling. The club had become his life, and the members were like his family, and the club's rules became his religion. Goldsmith's size and fighting skills, which once made him an attractive prospect, were now making him a valuable enforcer for the club. When fights with other rival clubs or within the Hells Angels themselves arose, Goldsmith was often out on the front lines. Although he had a reputation for violence, that was something that he never bragged about. This served as both a deterrent to his enemies and a reassurance to his fellow brothers. Now, life in the Hells Angels was more than just brawls and bikes. Goldsmith had to navigate a complex social hierarchy within the club, which meant balancing respect for senior members with his own ambitions. He went to meetings and he went on runs, which are group rides that could go for hundreds of miles. And he was involved in the club's various business ventures. Some of them were legal, and a lot of them were not. A lot of times, the club activities skirted the edge of what was legal, and sometimes directly went way over that line. Now, Goldsmith maintains that the media and law enforcement would often exaggerate the club's involvement in organized crime, but he also doesn't deny that illegal activities were just part of the lifestyle. There was drug dealing, protection rackets, and violent confrontations with rival clubs that were all just now part of the new world that he lived in. One of the most significant challenges that Goldsmith faced was the ongoing rivalry with the Mongols Motorcycle Club. This is a feud that had been going on for years and would finally come to a boil, and it happened in such a way that it would ultimately change the course of Goldsmith's life. Now, Goldsmith's son, who was also a member of the Hells Angels, was getting married in Las Vegas in 2008. This should have been a joyous family occasion. However, it turned into a violent confrontation when members of the Mongols showed up at the wedding. Goldsmith, who was always their protector, went face to face with the intruders. The following fight would have far-reaching consequences for both Goldsmith personally and for the ongoing war between the two clubs. Even though there was constant tension and the ever-present risk of violence or being arrested, Goldsmith seemed to thrive in the Hells Angels. His loyalty and capabilities were well recognized, and eventually, he made it to the top position of chapter president in Las Vegas. While he was in this role, he oversaw the club's activities in the area. He also managed relationships with other chapters and worked to expand the Hells Angels' influence in the area. As a leader, he tried to steer the chapter toward legitimate business activities, and he encouraged members to open businesses and to be more discreet with their illegal activities. And he wanted to focus on the brotherhood aspect of the club. However, he found that the changing culture of an organization like the Hells Angels was no easy task. During his time with the Hells Angels, Goldsmith had a complex relationship with law enforcement. Of course, he was no stranger to run-ins with the police. He also worked on relationships with certain officers. This would be a very delicate balancing act, because he was both an outlaw and someone who would occasionally cooperate with the police. This would play a significant role in his downfall. For many years, Goldsmith had lived the life that he had dreamed of when he was a young kid in Milwaukee. He had the respect of his peers and the fear of his enemies. Plus, he had the sense of belonging that he was always looking for. It can be just as treacherous as it is thrilling. The brotherhood he had sacrificed so much for was about to be tested in ways that he could never imagine. The beginning of the end for Charles PeeWee Goldsmith and his life as a Hells Angel can be tracked back to that fateful day in Las Vegas at his son's wedding back in 2008. Although Goldsmith had walked away from the confrontation, these are serious felonies that carried potential for some significant time in prison. As Goldsmith's size and reputation gave him a certain level of respect and protection. During this time in prison, Goldsmith had plenty of opportunity to reflect on his life choices. The betrayal of his fellow club members was really weighing heavily on his mind. He started to question the very idea of brotherhood that had drawn him to the Hells Angels in the first place. When he got out in 2013, Goldsmith found that the world of outlaw bikers had changed quite a bit. The old codes of honor that they had once lived by seemed to have gone away. The Hells Angels, like a lot of other motorcycle clubs, were under increased scrutiny from law enforcement and were struggling to maintain their power and influence. Goldsmith was feeling disillusioned and betrayed, and he made the difficult decision to leave the Hells Angels. It wasn't an easy choice. I mean, the club had been in his life for over a decade, and leaving meant turning his back on the brotherhood that he had once held sacred. But Goldsmith felt there was no other way. The trust had been broken, and the risks of staying in the club outweighed any benefits. Now, leaving the Hells Angels is not a simple process. Goldsmith had to surrender his patch and all of his club-related paraphernalia. He was no longer welcome in the clubhouse where he once presided. His former brothers now looked at him with suspicion or just outright hostility. The transition back to civilian life was a challenge. He had to find new ways to recreate himself. He had to build a life outside of the structure and excitement of the club. He moved away from Las Vegas and was looking for a fresh start in a place where his reputation as a Hells Angel wouldn't follow him. Today, Charles PeeWee Goldsmith looks back on his time with the Hells Angels with a mixture of nostalgia and, of course, regret. He values the experiences he had and the brotherhood he once felt, but he's also very aware of what it cost him. He lost some years when he went to prison, he had a lot of legal troubles, and worst of all was the betrayal by those he had once considered family. Goldsmith's story serves as a cautionary tale about the realities of life in an outlaw motorcycle club. The promise of brotherhood and belonging that draws a lot of people to these organizations often comes with a very heavy price. The line between loyalty and self-preservation can blur when someone is facing serious legal consequences. But Goldsmith's story also speaks to the human ability for change and redemption. Even though there were many dark chapters in his life, he managed to build a new existence for himself. He wrote a book about his experiences, titled Brotherhood, The Greatest Lie Ever Told, which gives us an insider's perspective on the world of outlaw bikers. In sharing his story, Goldsmith hopes to shed some light on the complex life inside a motorcycle club. Now, he's not trying to glorify his past, and he doesn't entirely renounce it either. Instead, he presents it as it was, a life filled with highs and lows, brotherhood and betrayal, and freedom mixed with confinement. The story of Charles PeeWee Goldsmith is more than just the story of one guy's journey through the ranks of the Hells Angels. It's a reflection on the nature of belonging and the allure of outlaw culture, and it shows us the often harsh realities that live beneath the surface of such organizations. It challenges us to consider the price of loyalty and the true meaning of brotherhood. As we look back on Goldsmith's journey, we still have several thought-provoking questions. What is it that drives someone to seek belonging in outlaw organizations? How thin is the line between brotherhood and betrayal when you're faced with legal consequences? And ultimately, is the promise of freedom that is offered by groups like the Hells Angels just an illusion that comes with too high of a price? Goldsmith's story also sheds light on the challenging landscapes of outlaw motorcycle clubs in America. They were once seen as symbols of rebellion and freedom, but these organizations have faced increased pressure from law enforcement and ever-changing social norms. The romanticized image of the outlaw biker, which was made popular by films and television, is often at odds with the more complex and sometimes brutal reality. In the years following his exit from the Hells Angels, Goldsmith has had to confront the consequences of his choices. Relationships with family members, which were strained by years of club life and legal troubles, had to be slowly rebuilt. He found out that finding employment with a criminal record and a notorious past proved to be a pretty big challenge. In spite of all this, Goldsmith has persevered. He's used his experiences as a cautionary tale for others who might be seduced by the allure of life as an outlaw. Goldsmith's dramatic transition from outlaw to author and speaker highlights another aspect of his story, the power of redemption and being able to reinvent yourself. By sharing his experiences, he hopes to give some insight into a world that is often misunderstood or glamorized. His talks with youth groups and his book serve as a harsh reminder of the real-world consequences of choosing a life outside of the law. The legacy of Charles PeeWee Goldsmith in the history of outlaw bikers is a complicated one. To some of his former friends, he might be looked at as a traitor for leaving the club and speaking out about his experiences. To law enforcement, he is a guy who provided some valuable insider perspective on the operations of one of the world's most notorious motorcycle clubs. To those fascinated by outlaw culture, he provides a raw, unfiltered look at the reality behind the myth. As we come to the end of our look at Goldsmith's life, it's important to recognize the broader meaning of his story. It serves as a reminder of the choices we make in pursuit of belonging and identity that can have some far-reaching consequences. It challenges our perceptions of loyalty and makes us confront some sometimes blurry lines between brotherhood and being a criminal. Even more so, Goldsmith's journey from troubled teen in Milwaukee to a high-ranking Hells Angels member and finally to an author and speaker is a testament to the complexity of human nature. It serves as a reminder that we are capable of both great loyalty and profound change, and that our past actions do not necessarily define our future, and that redemption is possible even after years of living outside the law. At the end of it all, the story of Charles PeeWee Goldsmith is way more than just a tale of one man's rise and fall within an outlaw motorcycle club. It brings us back to the human story of searching for belonging and making difficult choices and then facing the consequences of those choices. And then ultimately, you've got to find a way to move forward, This is a story that continues to resonate in a world where the allure of counterculture and the desire for brotherhood remain powerful forces. As we look to the future, Goldsmith's story brings up a lot of important questions about the role of outlaw motorcycle clubs in modern society. Will these organizations continue to adapt and survive under the pressure of increased law enforcement scrutiny and, of course, our ever-changing social norms? Or do you think they're just going to fade into history and be remembered more for their mythology than their reality? Only time will tell. What remains clear about the world of outlaw bikers is that their culture is far more complex and nuanced than the media shows us. It's a world of contradictions, a world of freedom and constraints, of loyalty and betrayal. It's an odd mixture of brotherhood and individual survival. It's a world that continues to fascinate and perplex us because it challenges our notions of law and order and the human desire for belonging. Join us next time on Apex Crime Lords as we dive into the twisted world of Simeon Mogilevich, the boss of bosses in Russian Mafia. From his humble beginnings as a small-time hustler in Soviet-era Ukraine to becoming one of the FBI's most wanted, Mogilevich's story is a masterclass in international crime. How did this stocky, unassuming man build a criminal empire that spanned continents? Get ready for a tale of money laundering, arms dealing, and political manipulation that'll make your head spin. You won't want to miss this one. Now, what do you think of Goldsmith's story? What's the balance between brotherhood and loyalty versus saving your own skin? Did Charles ask too much of his brothers to keep quiet and possibly face prosecution themselves? Or were these rats who are saving their own hides from a sinking ship? How far are you willing to go for things like brotherhood, loyalty, and a code of honor? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below and give us a like, comment, and a share. Until next time, stay safe and stay dangerous.